She is 9 years old. 9 years old, and the crowd goes quiet when she walks. Not the hush of obligation, not the polite stillness of people who've been told to stand still and behave. Something else, something older. The kind of quiet that falls over a room when it recognizes something it has seen before and thought it would never see again. There are people in that crowd who watched Diana walk this same path, who stood in this same December cold, breath clouding, and fingers numb inside their gloves and felt something crack open in their chest they couldn't name. Some of them have been coming here for 40 years. Some of them came to this church the Christmas after Diana died because they didn't know where else to bring their grief. They are not projecting. They are not sentimental fools drowning a child in a dead woman's ghost. They are watching a girl carry herself in a way that cannot be taught. Posture can be taught. Pacing can be drilled. The angle of the chin, the placement of the hands, the precise social geometry of a royal wave, all of it teachable, learnable, coachable. Charlotte has clearly been taught. You can see the lessons in the straightness of her spine, the measured weight of each step. But there is something else underneath the lessons, something that lives below the training like a current beneath ice. You can feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives, in your joints, and in the animal part of your brain that still knows how to read the sky. She glances into the crowd, and for just a moment, one frame, one heartbeat, her eyes do the thing Diana's eyes used to do. She sees people, not the crowd, not the arrangement of faces, the individual, the woman in the red scarf, the child being hoisted onto a father's shoulders, the old man in the back who has been crying since the moment the royals appeared, crying quietly and with great dignity, and the way people cry when they are not sad but simply full. Charlotte sees him. Her chin tilts, almost nothing, a degree, and something in her face softens. 9 years old. The people who have been coming here for 40 years reach for each other's hands. This is a story about a Christmas morning that belonged, officially, to tradition, to ceremony, to the annual choreography of a family walking to church in front of cameras that have been documenting this walk since before most of the people watching were born. But tradition is only ever a frame. What fills it? What lives inside the ritual and makes it matter? That is not tradition. That is the person standing inside it. And this year, standing inside it, was a girl in a burgundy coat who looked out at 40,000 people carrying 40 years of grief and love and complicated feeling. Eigen did not look away. What happened next is not a fairy tale. It is not a triumph or a coronation or a before and after. It is something quieter and stranger and more true than any of those things. It is the story of a morning when a child reminded an entire country of something they had been trying not to forget. I have covered 17 royal Christmas walks. I say this not as a credential, but as a confession. 17 times I have stood in the cold outside St. A Mary Magdalene church on the Sandringham estate with my press badge lanyard frozen against my sternum, typing notes on a phone screen I can barely feel, watching a family walk approximately 200 meters to church and back, while the world treats it like an event of consequence. My editor assigns it to me every year with the same apologetic email. Merry Christmas, Elaine. You know the drill. Try to find a human angle. I have written about hats. I have written about children waving and children sulking and children tripping over their own shoes. I have written about the particular physics of the royal wave, the elbow, the rotation, the radius, more times than I have written about things that matter. This year, I almost didn't come. I had the flu, the proper kind. The kind that makes the inside of your skull feel like wet concrete. My flatmate offered to cover it. I said no, as because 17 years of doing something stupid breeds a particular commitment to continuing to do it, and I drove to Norfolk in the dark with a thermos of tea and a box of tissues and the dull internal monologue of a person who has run out of ways to be interesting to themselves. I parked. I walked to my spot. A security officer I recognized from 3 previous years nodded at me. I nodded back. I stamped my feet. I checked my phone. The crowd was larger than usual. I noticed that first. Before anything else, the density of people, the way they were pressed forward against the barriers with a specific quality of waiting that was different from the performed patience of a routine crowd. These people were eager. Not in the celebrity sighting way, not in the Instagram content way, eager in the way people are when they believe something is about to happen that they will want to remember. I didn't know what they knew. I filed that observation away. The family emerged at 10:52, and I've timed it before. I timed it again out of habit, fingers finding my stopwatch app with the mindless automation of too many years doing this. The Prince and Princess of Wales came first, William with the slightly wind-scoured look of a man who grew up in this particular cold and has stopped noticing it, Catherine, in a coat the color of pine needles, composed the way she is always composed, which is to say perfectly, but with a quality that makes perfect seem warm rather than architectural. The children followed. George first, nearly 11 now, growing into himself at a rate that seemed slightly unfair to the cameras trying to capture it, his expression already beginning its long adolescent retreat into carefully maintained neutrality. Then Louis, 6 years old and incapable, bless him, of performing anything. He was scanning the crowd with the swiveling attention of a golden retriever who has heard a sound. He spotted something. A dog, probably. Or someone's elaborate hat, and grabbed Catherine's hand with both of his and pointed, and was told very quietly to stop pointing. And he stopped, and then pointed again with just one finger as a compromise. The crowd laughed, warmly. Louis is the one they love to laugh with. Then Charlotte. I noticed the coat first. Burgundy. Not quite red, not quite purple. Something in between, rich and deliberate. High collar, buttoned to the throat. And she was wearing it the way some children wear dress clothes, which is to say, not like they're wearing a costume, but like the clothes have simply become part of them for the duration, settled into the body rather than sitting on top of it. I noted, coat, burgundy, composed. Then she stopped. Not a trip, not a stumble. A deliberate pause, barely long enough to register. One half beat of stillness, her head turning to the left toward a section of the crowd pressed 3 deep against the barrier. I followed her eye line. There was a girl there, maybe 5 years old, maybe 6, hoisted up on the barrier itself with both small fists wrapped around the metal, bundled into a coat approximately twice her size. She was holding a handwritten sign that said Charlotte in letters that wobbled with the effort of someone who was still learning to hold a pen. Glitter. She had used glitter. Charlotte saw the sign. I watched her see it, the microsecond of recognition, on something crossing her face that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite surprise, something that landed between them. An acknowledgement. I see you. I see that you made that. Then she walked to the barrier. This is not protocol. Protocol is the path, the measured forward progress, the equidistant engagement. You do not veer. She veered. Her parents didn't stop her. William glanced, registered, kept walking. Which is its own kind of trust. The trust of a father who has already made a private calculation about who his daughter is and no longer needs to supervise the outcome. Charlotte leaned toward the girl with the sign. She said something I couldn't hear. The girl with the sign went absolutely still with the specific paralysis of a child who has received an amount of attention they did not actually prepare for, despite having stood in the cold for 2 hours, specifically to receive it. And then the girl laughed. High and sudden, the way a child laughs when they've been holding something very carefully and are finally allowed to put it down. Charlotte straightened, rejoined the path. The burgundy coat moved forward without hurry. I was still writing paused, approach to barrier, child with sign when I realized my hands were shaking. Not from cold. I'd been standing in the same cold for 40 minutes and my hands had been fine. I stood there with my shaking hands and my frozen press badge and my 17 years of hat coverage and tried to locate the specific thing that had just happened. Tried to name it with the professional vocabulary I have built for exactly these moments. I couldn't. What I had just watched was a 9-year-old child make a decision. Not a coached decision, not a choreographed moment, not a carefully managed piece of royal optics. A decision made in half a second, and in front of 40,000 people and 17 years of my professional cynicism, to walk towards someone who needed to be seen. I know what Diana's version looked like. I've watched the archive footage enough times to have it memorized. The way she moved toward people, not like a royal performing proximity, but like someone who was constitutionally incapable of noticing suffering and looking away. Like it was simply a failure of imagination she couldn't commit. Charlotte is 9 years old. She does not yet know what it means that people see her mother in her grandmother's warmth in her, the long, strange thread of women in this family who have stood in this particular cold and found a way to be present inside the ceremony without being consumed by it. She doesn't know. She just walked toward the girl with the glitter sign. The crowd made a sound I can only describe as involuntary, not a cheer, not applause, in something that started in the chest and escaped without permission. The old man in the back, the one who had been crying since they appeared. I found him again in the crowd after Charlotte passed. He was still crying, but he was smiling now. Those are different things. He knew the difference. I could see that he knew. Her name was Margaret. I found this out later, not because I went looking for her specifically, but because when you've been a royal correspondent for 17 years and something genuinely unexpected happens, the muscle memory of the job takes over before the thinking does. I asked around. The security officer who'd nodded at me pointed me toward a woman in a mustard yellow coat standing near the barrier on the south side, who turned out to be Margaret's daughter, who was also named Margaret, which created a brief confusion we both navigated with the mutual exhaustion of two people standing in a Norfolk field at 11 in the morning on Christmas Day. Margaret, the elder one, the one who had been crying, was 78. She had first come to this walk in 1993. She told me this while unwrapping a hard candy from her coat pocket with the slow, deliberate focus of a woman who has learned to attend to small physical tasks as a method of managing large emotional ones. Or 2 years before Diana's Panorama interview. 4 years before Paris. I came because I wanted to see her, Margaret said, not specifying who her was. She didn't need to. I was 36 that year. I had just lost my mother. I didn't know what to do with it. The grief. I didn't know where to put it. She got the candy unwrapped. Held it. And Diana walked out and she looked at the crowd and I thought, oh, she knows what this is. She has her own version of this. And somehow that was enough. I asked her if she'd come every year since. Most years, she said. I missed 1997. Couldn't bear it. She said it simply. Couldn't bear it. 6 words. I didn't ask her to elaborate, and she didn't, because some things have already been said, everything they need to say. I asked her about today. She took a long time, looked at the path where the family had walked, now empty, the crowd thinning as people began the cold migration back to their cars, or their Christmas dinners, their own families and their own griefs and their own small ceremonies of getting through the day. She looked at me, Margaret said. She meant Charlotte. Not the way they train them to do it, not the scan and smile and move on. She looked. She paused, turned the candy over in her fingers. I was holding myself together, you know. I do that. I'm good at it by now. But she looked at me, and something went sideways. She stopped. Started again. It was the same look. I don't know how else to say it. The same look Diana had. The one that says, "I see that you're carrying something. I see that it's heavy." I wrote this down. Then I stopped writing, because writing felt like the wrong response to what she was saying. Margaret put the candy in her mouth, looked away. When she looked back, she had rearranged her face into something more composed. And I recognize this as the process of a person who has had a great deal of practice deciding what to show the world and what to keep. "I'm not one of those people who thinks the dead come back," she said. "I'm a practical woman. I have a mortgage and a bad knee, and I watch too much television. I don't believe in any of that." She looked down the empty path. "But I believe in inheritance, what passes through, what carries." Inside the church, I was thinking about bones. Not in a morbid way, in the way you think about architecture. The structural elements that hold a shape up from inside, invisible until they're absent, at which point the whole thing collapses and you understand what was doing all the work. I was thinking about the bone structure of what I'd witnessed on the path, trying to identify its load-bearing elements. What made Charlotte's pause matter in the way it mattered? Dear, what separated it from the dozens of other royals meet children moments I've documented over 17 years, most of which I could not tell you a single detail about. Part of it was her age. 9 sits in a specific developmental window, old enough for self-consciousness to have arrived, young enough that it hasn't yet learned to fully override the instinct. At 9, you already know you're being watched. You already understand the weight of the moment. But the impulse toward a child with a glitter sign can still outrun the calculation. The animal response still sometimes beats the trained one to the finish line. Part of it was the pause itself, that half-beat of stillness before she moved. It meant she had noticed something, processed it, and chosen. Not impulse. Not automation. A choice made visible in the compression between perception and action. The thing about Diana, the thing that made the archive footage feel different from other royal footage of the same era, was exactly this: the visible moment of choosing. The pause before the approach. The slight recalibration of whatever she had been doing before she redirected toward the person who needed something. As though she was always running a quiet parallel computation that asked, "What does this person need? And can I give it?" Most of us run that computation. Fewer of us act on it in front of cameras. Fewer still do it because the alternative simply does not occur to them as viable. Charlotte paused. Then she walked. I don't know what the girl with the glitter sign felt in that moment, and I'm not going to speculate. But I know what Margaret felt standing in the crowd 40 feet away, because Margaret told me, or came as close to telling me, as a practical woman with a bad knee is going to come. She felt seen, not by Charlotte specifically, or not only by Charlotte. She felt seen by the through line, the thing that carries, the quality of attention that shows up in the same family across decades and seems to have nothing to do with training and everything to do with something that moves sideways through genetics or love or simple proximity to someone who modeled it day after day until it became part of the architecture. "Queen Elizabeth was like that too," Margaret said before I'd left. "People forget that now. They remember the stiffness. They don't remember the eyes. But when she actually looked at you, when she decided to really look, it was the same. That same quality of presence. Like she had set down everything else she was carrying and the only thing in her hands was you." She nodded once. Conclusion reached. Candy finished. "3 of them," she said. "See, 3 women from the same family with the same look in their eyes, and it skips a generation and jumps a generation and doesn't care about the official portraits or the constitutional role or any of it. It just keeps showing up." She started walking back toward the car park. The mustard-yellow coat moved steadily away, her daughter falling into step beside her, their heads tilting toward each other in the private geometry of long familiarity. And I stood in the cold and watched them go and did not write anything down. Some things resist the notebook. You have to just let them be what they are. The path where Charlotte had paused was empty now. The barrier was empty. The glitter from the girl's sign had scattered. A few gold specks on the frost. It looked like stars. I filed the piece at 3:47 in the afternoon, sitting in the car park of a BP station on the A148. Not eating a cheese sandwich I'd bought from the garage with the resigned acceptance of a person who has fully abandoned the pretense of a Christmas dinner. My editor called 20 minutes later. "This isn't your usual," she said. "No," I said. "It's better." I didn't say anything. I was looking at a roundabout. There was a plastic Father Christmas nailed to a lamppost that had been there since at least 2019, because I had driven past it on 17 December drives to Sandringham, and it had developed a particular kind of weathered authority. Its red coat faded to the orange of old warning tape, one hand raised in a permanent gesture that might have been a wave or might have been stop. "You going to tell me what happened to you out there?" my editor asked. I watched a 9-year-old make a decision," I said. Silence on the line. "That's what the piece is about?" she said. "That's what the piece is about." She let me go. I sat in the car park and watched the Father Christmas and ate the rest of the sandwich and let the afternoon do whatever it was going to do. Here is what I did not put in the piece. I put it here instead in the personal log I've kept for 11 of the 17 years. The one that runs parallel to the official notebook, and the one that contains the things that are true but not printable, or true but not provable, or true in a way that resists the active voice and the inverted pyramid. What I did not put in the piece: Charlotte stumbled. Not on the path, not in front of the crowd, on the return. I was repositioned by then, further south, catching the family on the way back from the church. They were 20 meters ahead of me, moving through a tighter section where the crowd barriers had compressed the walkable space. Charlotte was holding what appeared to be a small paper order of service, the kind they hand out inside, thin folded card with the hymn numbers printed on it. She was doing what children do with things they're holding, which is to say treating it as a fidget object, folding and refolding the corner while she walked. She stepped on the heel of her own shoe. Half stumble. Caught immediately. She grabbed the edge of her coat, weight redistributed, posture reestablished in approximately 1 second. No one around her broke stride. William didn't turn. Catherine continued her conversation with a Sandringham estate employee walking beside them. Louis was, at this point, conducting some kind of complex negotiation about a corgi he had spotted in the crowd and was fully occupied. Charlotte stood straight, kept walking. But in the half-second before the recovery, in the fraction between stumble and correction, I saw her face. She was embarrassed. The real kind. The private kind. The flush along the jaw and the infinitesimal contraction around the eyes that happens when you believe you've failed some standard that matters to you. Not performance, actual mortification, immediate and personal, and then, in the same half-second or the one right after it, she smoothed it. Not suppressed, smoothed. The way you iron a crease out of fabric. The evidence of the disruption disappears, but the memory of it remains in the threads. She lifted her chin. She straightened. She walked. 9 years old. I have watched professional politicians fail to recover from public stumbles with that kind of quiet speed. I have watched grown adults in high-stakes situations let a single moment of exposure unravel the rest of the day. The recovery is its own skill, maybe a harder one than the initial composure. Composure can be set in advance, like a dial, but recovery has to be built in real time out of whatever you have available. Charlotte built it in approximately 1 second out of whatever she had available. What she had available was the understanding, somewhere below conscious thought, that the walk continues, that the path doesn't stop because you stumbled. That the crowd is still there, and the church is behind you, and home is ahead, and the thing that is required of you is not perfection, but continuation. I know where she learned that. Most people who watch this walk today know where she learned that. Continuation is the family inheritance. The actual one, underneath the castles and the titles and the constitutional weight of it all. The thing that passes through. The choice to keep walking after the stumble. And the choice to keep appearing after the loss. The choice to keep looking at the crowd when the crowd is looking back at you with all of its need and its grief and its desperate, complicated love. And to look back at it honestly instead of hiding behind the ceremony. Queen Elizabeth walked to this church for 70 years. The last time was in 2021. She was 95. She came alone. Philip had died in April, and she sat alone in the church in the chair that had been a chair for decades. And the photographs of that are some of the most devastating images I have seen in 17 years of doing this, not because they are dramatic, but because they are quiet. Because she just sat there, upright, present, in the chair. She didn't explain herself. She didn't signal the grief. She just sat in the chair and was in it, and the photographs exist. Continuation. I drove home in the dark. The flu was back or had never really left. I sitting heavy at the base of my skull with the patient certainty of something that knows it has more to say. The Father Christmas on the roundabout waved or warned me as I passed. I thought about the girl with the glitter sign. I thought about Margaret in the mustard coat. I thought about the old man in the back of the crowd who had been crying since the family appeared, and who had kept crying after Charlotte passed, but differently. I thought about the stumble and the recovery, or in the fact that I was the only member of the press corps positioned to see it, and that I had chosen not to write about it, and what that choice said about me, and whether it was the right choice, and whether that question even had an answer. I thought about what Charlotte will carry, not the titles. The other thing. The specific weight of being looked at by people who are looking for something they lost and hoping, with the particular hope of people who have been hoping for a long time, that they might find it in you. She is 9. She doesn't know yet what she's carrying. She just knows how to walk. For now, that's everything. For now, that's more than enough. The road back to London was empty. The sky over Norfolk was the kind of dark that only exists in the places where they've kept the lights away from it, thick and full of itself, the stars doing what stars do on clear December nights in the cold. I turned the radio off and drove in silence and tried to remember the last time a 9-year-old had made me feel like this. I couldn't. I'm not sure one ever had. End.